Hey everyone, excited to have Joel here today. Thanks for listening if you are. Anyways, Joel is I think we've become good friends. It's been, he and I have worked together on and off or known of each other for probably 4 or 5 years. I greatly admire some points about Joel and I'm excited for him to tell more of his story today. So welcome, Joel.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I'm excited.
I'll go ahead and just, Joel, if you can introduce yourself, give us like a 90-second elevator pitch on who you are. And
Yeah,
yeah, it's a lot
yeah,
to ask, but
yeah. My name is Joel. Currently live out here in Nashville, Tennessee. I started off my career in corporate finance, and I quickly, within a few years, realized I did not want to do that for the rest of my career. So I started trying to figure out what I wanted to do with my life and got into e-commerce back in 2015, which was a great time to get into the game. And so I got started with one brand, and it ended up going really well for us. And I'm sure we'll dive into more of these points, but it started one brand, ended up selling it in 2018, started two more brands around that same time when I was exiting. And I've been running those for the last 7 years and still have two of the brands today. And in that time, I've had other little, starts and failures and things I've tried that haven't gone well. But I've had three successful e-commerce brands. I feel lucky to even have that with how up and down everything's been the last several years. But I've been doing e-commerce now for 9 years. My wife and I work together. We do this primarily as a lifestyle type business operation. We try to keep it lean and flexible and spend a lot of time with our kids. And my wife runs a lot of the creative side, and I run a lot of the business operational side.
and you have 3 kids, right?
We actually have four kids,
4 kids.
and yeah, one middle schooler and three in elementary school. And that's a lot of our time just goes to trying to manage schedules and yeah.
And you've been in Nashville, like you said, a few years, 3 years now or something.
Coming up on 3 years this summer and absolutely love it.
Yeah, it's amazing. I spent a week there last year and just thought it was unbelievable.
Yeah, it's a beautiful, beautiful place. Everybody wants to, it's like almost like a trendy place right now to vacation. And then people are just moving here so fast. I think once
Yeah,
people see the beauty, it's like, it's a magnet.
it is nice. They have great running trails, biking trails, just good place to be for sure. Good music scene and food. Well, thanks, Joel, for that intro. I think I want to start by I remember you told me your story once where you said you and a buddy were just in your corporate finance jobs playing ping pong or something, and that's kind of inspired you to start a business. Would love to hear maybe the origin of when you decided corporate finance isn't for me, and how that went.
Yeah, that's exactly right. Yeah, it's still so vivid today. But yeah, we would play ping pong probably every single day, like on lunch breaks and just breaks throughout the day. And we'd always be hitting ping pong balls and like brainstorming, doing something with drop shipping or real estate, or we just go through any number of ideas. We were listening to lots of like passive income podcasts and just trying to figure out like what we want to do with our life, because I think we both enjoyed finance. Like we were both definitely like Excel spreadsheet type guys,
Yeah.
but I just don't think we liked the 9 to 5 lifestyle, like going into an office every day, the office politics. Um, I knew I wasn't going to do this for 30, 40 years pretty quickly. I was like, there's no way. I can't do this. And so that's when we started figuring out what we wanted to do. And we started so simple. We were like, let's buy and sell stuff on Amazon. And we tried doing some retail arbitrage where we'd buy stuff on discount at like Target and resell it. And after the first month, we made like $800 and spent like 30 hours of work doing it. And we were like, okay, maybe this isn't going to work. And that's when we got our wives involved and ended up picking a different industry and starting a real brand and actually doing it the right way. And that was back in 2015. Yeah. So I still remember to this day, though, the day we both quit our jobs. I remember I wanted to quit for a couple of weeks, and our brand was doing really well. Like we had enough cash
Okay.
flow to support our family. And I was like just so ready to be done. And my partner was a little more cautious. And I
Yeah.
remember one day he called me up and he was like, "Hey, I just quit." I was like, "You did?" So I went right into my boss's office at that exact moment. And I was like, "Hey, I'm actually quitting today."
You guys didn't have the same boss as yours.
We were at different companies at that point. So
Okay. Okay.
yeah, but yeah, I finally made it happen and never went back.
So you didn't at that point, you guys had enough money to pay both of you guys enough to at least survive. Is that
Exactly.
so you
Yeah.
didn't quit until that point. So up at that point you were working basically double time. What
Yeah.
was it, a significant lift to get the business started, or
Yeah. So we were working at our corporate job, the normal 40 hours a week. And then I would say on the business, we were maybe 10 to 20 hours a week. So it
okay,
wasn't crazy, crazy. We had both of our wives helping as well.
okay.
We had four of us working on the business, and we were doing maybe calls twice a week for a couple hours and then just working separately. Sorry if my dog's working.
Oh, that's all right.
And then working separately for a few hours on different aspects of the business. But it wasn't a huge, huge lift. But yeah, we waited until we had enough cash flow to pay both of us at least a reasonable salary. Probably wasn't as good
Yeah,
as corporate, but
that makes sense. No, I've seen the same. I did the same thing. I didn't quit my job until we had enough to pay at least survival income, you know?
yes.
So a lot of people want the entrepreneur lifestyle, right? I mean, I think it's pretty, like I'd say it's pretty desired. And in some ways it's even trendy to be an entrepreneur. And so far in my anecdotal experience, I've met a lot of people that have said, hey, I want to be an entrepreneur. I want to do this. And generally speaking, those people aren't as successful as the people that it almost like happens to them, right? Like they're in a job and they see a problem and they're like, I'm going to go fix this problem. And then all of a sudden it becomes a business. And so I'm curious, why do you think you were successful when so many people aren't at saying like, I want to be an entrepreneur for the sake of like creating a life that is more flexible, fluid, and meaningful?
Yeah, I think you're spot on. Like, it is very, very desirable for all those reasons. And I think everybody, like, in the back of their mind, like, the dream job is like working for yourself and being your own
Yeah,
boss, working from home. And I think, yeah, and when I think about my story, I think a lot of it does come down to expectations. I think
yeah,
when I went into it, I wasn't envisioning, like, I need to go start the next Google or Facebook or Pinterest. I don't need to even start $100 million brand. In my head, I was like, what can I do that's going to make me 50 to 100K a year? And let's just
yeah,
start there. And then, like, when I started doing research, it felt feasible. It felt doable. I was like, you start breaking it down mathematically. And I was like, okay, if I can sell a product for $25 this many times per day at this profit margin, that adds up to $80,000 a year income. And
yeah,
so when you break it down to that, you're like, okay, that seems reasonable and doable. And then, I think it did help that we were fairly business savvy, having the finance background. Like, we knew our financials and our numbers. And I think that does help a ton.
yeah,
I think some entrepreneurs are more ideas people and
yeah,
creative people, and like they see the vision, but they don't have the execution or the numbers to back it up. So I think that helped. And then I think the other thing that maybe helped a little bit was just doing a ton of, we did do quite a bit of product research intentionally to be like, what is like a no brainer, low hanging fruit product that's going to do well on Amazon as long
yeah,
as we do a good job executing. And I think some people just pick something they're passionate about or pick something without doing a ton of research. And so I think we were pretty deliberate on the product and category we chose. That combined with our business and finance background and like realistic expectations. I don't
yeah.
know. I think some combo there did help.
Yeah, I think you're probably right. Because I think that the realistic expectations is super valid. Because if I'm starting a company to compete with Google, I mean, my chances of success are
Yeah.
very low, right? And if I'm starting a company to make 50 to 100 grand a year for two families, like that's not that changes like your intensity, that changes like maybe a ton of things about
Yeah.
life. And I think you're probably right.
I think so. It also reduces the risk a little bit because I've started three. I mean, I've done lots of random ventures, but like the three businesses today that are
Yeah,
successful that I started, each were started with minimal investment. We're talking like our first one was $10,000 up front, and then I think the other two were 10,000. So like we
wow.
haven't gone into this thinking, oh, we need to go get investors or we need to invest 100 grand or 250. Like we were very, very reasonable. So like our downside was so minimal, and like the odds of us failing or going bankrupt were so minimal. So I think that helps take some of the pressure off as well. Or I think it prevents you from taking too big of risks, like going
Yeah, I
all in,
agree with that.
and like investing $100,000 into inventory or branding or like agencies to make you look legit. Like we didn't do any of that. We were scrappy. We were lean. We only scaled up when stuff was working. And I think all that kind of helped us not have some of like the early pitfalls that some people have.
I feel like as an entrepreneur myself, when I started my first business, it like I didn't have a great vision. So as things started to work, I think I got maybe we'll call it greedy, I didn't ever like get to that point where, wow, this is a pretty good business. I feel happy about it. Well, I never reached that point. And for you, I think that at some point you guys felt like, hey, we've accomplished what we want to accomplish. At least that's how, I've kind of understood your view. How do you have that measure in yourself that like, I have enough versus I need more, right? Like, well, I could be $100 million brand if I just did these six things, right? Which is sometimes I think the trap that we all get into. So curious your thoughts. Like,
Yeah.
do you feel like you have enough? How did you feel like it was okay to not grow faster than the next guy, to not have more money than the next guy, to not be a bigger brand than the next guy?
Yeah, that is a great question. Like the origins of why it's like it's hard to actually like know for sure why, but I do know some of the thought processes that went
Yeah.
on. Like I remember our first business, it was going so well. Like it was growing
Yeah.
very quickly. And I'm sure many people, and I know people that have done this where, okay, you start crossing into the multi-millions of revenue and you start thinking, ooh, if I got like a venture capital investor, we
Yeah.
could get $1 million injection and we could like quadruple inventory and grow this like a rocket ship. And I think maybe I'm a little more risk averse, even. I'm like, I feel like I'm like a healthy level of risk. Like I do
Yeah.
take risks, but like very measured. And so we never thought like we should blow this up with capital or debt or equity investment. And I think that maybe was a conscious way we slowed down to be like, whatever we can reinvest through profits while paying ourselves a very healthy income is how fast we're going to grow. I mean,
Mm.
we always kind of like ran the business. We wanted it to grow, but we wanted it to pay us really well so we could like travel and have a great life. And so we always balance those two things, which naturally makes your business grow a little slower.
Yeah.
If you're reinvesting every penny and getting investment from other people, you're going to grow way faster. You're going to build out a team, you're going to build out a headquarters, you're going to have overhead and, really cool branding and, all the things. And we kind of intentionally just had it a lot more lean and scrappy and like messy and had
Yeah.
contractors running a lot of the business. And, I think that in and of itself slowed down our growth rate and at the same time did make it very attractive for an acquisition. Like down the line, one of the biggest things that was attractive was how lean we were. Like we ran the operation so simply and it was so successful that when somebody eventually came to acquire it, it was a perfect acquisition target for somebody that wanted to take it and turn it into a rocket ship because that was their passion and their excitement. Like excitement level. And yeah, for us, we were making enough money and it was providing the lifestyle that we wanted, that the idea of growing it big for the sake of growing it big just never really even crossed our mind. Yeah.
I really admire that because personally, I think I'm far too influenced by like comparison, at least especially early on in my career, where I think if I was at $5 or $10 million, I would have been like, oh, but this guy over here he's at 20, he's at 30, and I got to go be bigger or better. And so I admire that ability to just be like, I feel good. Like this is accomplishing what I want it to accomplish,
Yeah.
and I don't need to put unnecessary pressure
Yeah.
um,
Yeah. It
on
does make
myself.
it a little, it does take away some of the pressure, takes away some of the risk. And yeah, I think the hard part about comparison, and, don't get me wrong, everybody compares. I've
Yeah,
definitely compared to other people, but I do feel like it feels so rare like for people to start businesses that become 20, 50, 100 million plus type businesses.
yeah,
It's very rare. And I think if that's like your benchmark, it's just so much pressure and then
yeah,
disappointment
yes,
it doesn't get there. And even if you do get there, then you're like, well, why am I not a $200 million company? Why am
yeah.
I not a $1 billion company? And it's like it never ends. I mean, until you're Elon Musk, so I feel
And
like
even then, it's not ending for him because he just went and bought Twitter and he wouldn't do this,
it
like,
never ends. So at some point everybody has to decide like, is there a line in which enough is enough, and what is that for you? And I know for me and my wife, we have very specific goals and plans of what we want our life to look like and what we want to be doing every year with our kids and our family and how we want to spend our time. And as soon as like the passive income from investments or our business income can support that lifestyle that we want, like to me that is the dream and that is the
yeah,
goal. And at whatever point I feel like I don't have to do anything but live off of passive income and maybe have some passion projects or things that my wife and I really enjoy, like that's what we'll do eventually. But yeah, in the meantime we're just trying to live the best life we can with ideally like the least amount of work to support our businesses that we can.
Love that. What are some of these, you talk about really like clear
Yeah.
metrics or clear focuses. Curious, I mean, maybe not the personal ones, but curious, what are some of them?
Yeah, I mean, for us, we love to travel. I mean, that's a big part of our life with our kids. Like we've last year, we for the first time traveled over to Europe with our kids and just loved it. We were kind of nervous to take four little kids to like to London and do subway trains and stuff, and it went great. And so this year we're going to try Paris with the kids, and we'll kind of go from there. But we want to like have our kids have some cool experiences with travel. We also our kids are really passionate about lots of different hobbies and sports or activities, and so like we want to be able to support them, both financially and just with our time, like showing up to their practices and their performances and making sure they feel like they have the opportunities to, achieve what they want to achieve. Like we don't really
Yeah.
push them to do anything unless they're passionate. And like one of our sons loves tennis and like he would play 5 days a week if he could. And so but that's a big commitment, both time and money. And so that's one of our priorities is making sure our kids are supported in that. My wife and I love to take trips, just me and her. And so that takes time and money as well. Life gets expensive and complicated with time when you have a full-time job, or if you're trying to run a $50 million enterprise, there is less time and flexibility to just take off anytime you want. You have employees that expect you to be there and be their boss. And, I think we're trying to build the flexibility into our brands to where they can run even if we're remote and provide enough money, do the things that we want to do with our life that feel more important to us.
I like that. You talk about they feel more important to you. I'm curious how things have changed in terms of importance as you've made money, right? Like what perspectives or priorities do you feel like have shifted over this course of like having $100,000 a year salary to now, where you're a lot more financially free?
Yeah. I mean, I think early on, I remember like fresh out of college, I remember us setting goals and being like, oh, I'd love it if we could like, I remember specifically, I had like a goal thing and I was like, if I could retire by the time I'm five with like $1 million, like I would feel like we did pretty good, because I come from a background where, my dad was just like super disciplined, focused on his 9 to 5 job. They were diligent savers their whole career and like they're going to retire and do just fine. And in my head, I was like, that sounds pretty good. Like work really consistent, save my money every month, and I'll be able to retire pretty well by the time I'm 50 or 60 years old. And that was my priority. I was kind of doing that. And then as we started having some success in e-commerce, I started thinking, okay, so I can move that timeline up. Like that would be pretty cool. And then I think for me, it's been a kind of a journey of like, okay, if you could get to the point where work is a smaller portion of your day-to-day time, then what would your focus be on? Because you do have to fill your days with something, and it can't all be golf and tennis necessarily, although I love golf and I love tennis. And so I do a lot of that. But then it is like, spending time with our kids is a lot of our priority. Like just, it takes a lot of time to go to our daughter's cheerleading events and our other kids' tennis events and their piano recitals and take them to all those things. And so that's become a bigger priority as we have had more flexibility. And then I think for us, it's just trying to be smart with the money we have made, because I wouldn't say by any means we're like so uber wealthy we never have to think about money again for the rest of our life. But, if we are smart with our money and we work hard on our existing businesses and, live a realistic, reasonable lifestyle, we feel pretty good with where we're at. And I think family, travel, and our favorite hobbies. I mean, that's probably our main priorities right now.
I love that. I think a lot of time, at least I've talked to a lot of people, and I think this is where I really admire you, that their identity becomes their business and their career. And so in in retiring or selling a business or doing these things, they don't have the identity that you've built around your family and travel and these hobbies and like experiencing these things with your family, with the people you care about. And so I feel like there's this period of loss that people experience that's very real. Like, hey, I have this identity when I was, the entrepreneur or the CEO or this or that. And now all of a sudden I'm not that. And I've experienced this personally. My identity was way too tied up into my business. And so when I don't have my business anymore, like there was definitely like seasons of, I would almost call it like a depression, right? Like you're like feeling like maybe don't matter as much, or maybe things are different. So I'm curious, do you feel like what we've talked about so far, where your approach, your realistic expectations, your goals, like this wasn't the end game, do you feel like that helped you avoid maybe creating your identity with your business and helped you continue to identify, at least from my perspective, as somebody that just like loves life and with your family, and as a father and a husband? Just curious your thoughts there.
Yeah, I would say so. I do think a lot of those expectations have helped because I know what you're saying. It's like you're so cool, right? When you're the
Yeah.
entrepreneur and like people reach out to you on LinkedIn and like, dude, you're so successful. Like, and
Yeah.
then you get out of the game and like all of a sudden it's like, are you even important anymore? Like I felt that in a small dose. Like my first business was probably our most successful venture, at least in that short time frame. Like it happened so quick and it put us on the map from like an entrepreneur networking perspective. And
Yeah.
the brand was pretty cool. And it opened up a lot of opportunities for me to meet people and, do podcasts here and there. That was cool. And when we got out of that business, my next two have been solid, but haven't been the same as like that first business. And so in some ways, it's like I can totally relate to what you're saying. It's like you don't have the same level of like
Yeah.
prestige in the world of entrepreneurship. And I think for me, maybe it's been over time, or maybe it is the expectations I've set. It hasn't bothered me as much because it's kind of like, when you're in middle school and like you want to be popular, you want to be cool, and that's super important. And then you get to high school and you're like, you kind of start settling into your own. And then you get to college and you're like, none of this matters really.
Yeah.
I think it's kind of that similar evolution, at least for me, where I kind of maybe cared about it a little more early on, and then the more I've removed myself from having that, even at all as a priority, then it kind of
Yeah.
just you kind of just forget about it. It's just at this point, it's like, am I making enough money to support my family and do what I want to do with my life? And if the answer is
Yeah.
yes, like I'm happy. I don't even like think about the identity portion almost at all anymore. And yeah, but I've seen a ton of entrepreneurs get trapped into that,
Yeah.
especially if you're the face of the business, or if you're like, you're on Instagram every day promoting your business. It's like you
Yeah.
can tie your identity into that. And I've been lucky. I haven't had to deal with that as much.
Well, even just like, I had hundreds of employees, and then all of a sudden, and any one of them, you send a message, and you're really important. So I sent a message, and, within 5 minutes, people are responding to all my messages. I feel like I need something done. I have somebody to reach out to for everything. I have a question about this, or I want to talk to this client. They all make it a priority
Yeah.
because you carry weight. And I feel like I just subconsciously associated way too much of my value with just like being needed and being important within my sphere. And so it's been like a really, for me, a reflective period as I've stepped away from the business last year, of just being like, that doesn't matter. Like you said, I think I'm just getting into like the college phase, like that you talk about,
Yeah.
and being able to step back. But yeah, it was surprisingly difficult for me, and that's something I admire about, in our conversations,
Yeah. I was
that
going to say
you
it's kind of
just, yeah.
hard. I was going to say it's hard though, because you don't see like the people that get the most attention are usually the ones with the most success, the biggest followings, the most employees. Like nobody's going out and like writing articles and talking about the sneaky entrepreneur that makes
Yeah.
money, that just like hangs out with his family. It's not a cool,
Yep. Yep. Yep.
like, there's not a lot of good role models in that space because it's not the most exciting story to write about. But I think deep down, when you get down to like the purpose of life, I think that's what everybody really, really does want, is like
Yeah.
a good lifestyle with their family, with enough money to not be stressed, and like do what they enjoy and love and prioritize the people most important. And I think we get away from those priorities often because of the rat race and TV and social media. And you get this like distorted picture of what you think success should be. When I think deep down, most of us, if we could really pick what we want to do, it would be a simpler, more
Yeah.
relaxed lifestyle with enough money to live the life you want to live. But yeah, I don't know. It's just not a cool story to write about.
It's the sneaky entrepreneur. I like that comment. It's the sneaky entrepreneurs aren't getting a lot of credit very often.
And there's some like sneaky ones out there. I mean, there's people out there making 50 million a year. No one
Yeah.
even knows who they are because they're not on the radar of anybody. And I think that's pretty cool. I love that. I always like the book Millionaire Next Door.
Yeah. Yeah.
I
Yeah. I
like
have that one.
like that attitude of like you don't have to be flashy to still just have a great life and a great lifestyle and be smart with money and
Yeah.
like, live the dream. Anybody can do it. And You just don't hear about it as often.
Well, that was something, and I don't know if you've noticed this in Nashville, but when I lived in the Midwest, I felt like people were super down to earth and you had no idea. Like somebody described it to me, like you have no idea if the house you're driving by is the person that donates $3 million to the church or the person that's living month to month on their salary, right? Like, because people generally lived a similar lifestyle. And it was surprising to me when I was in Lincoln in the Midwest. Now that's not 100% accurate, but generally speaking, it was a different experience than what I had
Yeah.
living in the West Coast and in Utah and so forth. So
Yeah, I think so. I would say similar. I do think people out here in Nashville, like there's obviously the super successful, music industry,
yeah,
crazy people, but there's a lot of, just down to earth. You would never guess like this person is probably worth $10 million. You
yeah,
wouldn't know, but they probably are,
yeah.
that.
No, I like that. It's funny too because I recently I've met a lot of people where they're like undiscoverable online, right? You would have no idea that they're successful because they're not on LinkedIn, they don't have like Facebook or social media, and they make so much money doing whatever they're doing, and they just don't care, right? They just don't care. And I've grown up in the digital age where it's like if you don't have a digital identity, who are you,
Yeah. Yeah.
right?
Nobody knows you're doing well.
Yeah, like come on, man.
Nobody knows you're doing well. Are you really doing well?
Yeah, no, it's true. I've been so surprised. There've been three people I met recently. I'm like, holy cow. And you look them up on LinkedIn and they're just like,
Yeah.
they're just non-existent or like just not even real. So, I love that. Now, I wonder, I heard you say one time, I was at, I think it was, you remember that, I think tangible school that we both
Yeah.
did that was the first time I met you. You said to all the people, you said, if I can do it, like any of you can do this, right? And you made it sound very like achievable being an entrepreneur to in what you've done. With your kids, I'm just curious how you've created this, what I would call like a really beautiful life that you make enough money, you have enough money, you've accomplished this. How are you teaching your kids? Are you teaching them that, hey, do exactly what I've done? Anyone can do it. Or how are you setting expectations for your kids? Because I would say that your life is uncommon relative to the masses. And so I'm just curious your thoughts
Yeah, we definitely talk about our businesses a lot with our kids. Like we
there.
always are showing them our designs and showing them new products, and we've had them involved with different aspects here and there with the business just to kind of give them exposure. And we've definitely just thrown out often, like, yeah, I mean, this could be something you could do something like this someday. Like if you find a
Yeah.
good idea, like you could do it. And so I think in the back of their minds, for sure, the seeds are planted of like, that would be cool. At the same time, they often are like, what is your job, dad? Like, what do you do? Do you work? And I'm like, no, I do work. Like, that's why I sit at my computer and, or like they'll come up and see me doing something on Facebook ads. Like, that looks boring. And I'm like, hey, but that's what kills is this boring work here. We have these little conversations here and there. And then like our oldest daughter, she's, getting into middle school, high school, where she's starting to think a little bit more about what she wants to do. And, she'll say something like, I really want to do like hair and makeup or cosmetology. And we're like, that's cool. Like, that sounds really fun. Like, have you ever thought about like, it might get boring to literally be the person doing the hair and makeup every single day for 40 years of your life. Like, but if you owned your own salon, you might be able to do it when you want to do it. And then maybe you could hire people to do it on the days when you're like, I just want to go home and have fun.
Yeah.
And, so then it goes from, okay, maybe cosmetology school is a good idea, but maybe getting a business degree first, or, kind of learning the basics of business in combination with a cosmetology degree might be a little more,
Yeah.
flexible and give you more opportunities than focusing on just that one thing. And so she's kind of, wrapping her head more around that potential idea. And so I think we'll continue to have those kind of conversations with them. We've always encouraged them to try to be entrepreneurial, like, lemonade stands and just like little ventures like that,
Yeah.
or trying to, get involved to make money, or, getting scrappy, buying stuff off of Facebook Marketplace and reselling things. They're just like whatever little
Yeah.
things they could do to make some money and kind of get into that mindset for sure. But we
I
we
love
hope
that.
we hope that they do. I mean, we're not pushing them in any one direction necessarily, and kind of we're pretty flexible in general. Like we want it definitely to be kind of led by the kids with anything from activities to schooling to career choice and stuff. And I think we'll probably support them in whatever direction they
Whatever
want
they
to
choose.
go. Like I think we'll definitely encourage them to try to eventually do something entrepreneurial just because of the flexibility.
Are you going to provide capital or do any of that kind of stuff with the kids? Have you thought about that?
We have thought about it, like even with like lemonade stands, sometimes it's like, you're trying to teach them how finance actually works. They go and do a lemonade stand, make $80, and it's like, hey, so my wife and I sometimes disagree on this, but I'm like, hey, you owe me $30 though for all the ingredients and all the stuff. That's how business works. And my wife's like, no, we should just let them have the 80. I mean, yeah, maybe you're right, but yeah, I think we definitely have thought about that, or like down the line, if our daughter would want to open a salon, it's like, that's
Yeah.
going to take 50K or 100K or whatever. I think, yeah, I think we would definitely help out depending on the child's desire and focus and like expertise and business plan. Like if they really show us that they've thought this through, we know they're a hard worker, they have the idea, the ability to execute. Yeah, I think like any other investment, like we'd definitely be open to it. And I think it'd be cool to be able to help your
Yeah,
kid get
that
something
would
up.
be cool.
I think the nightmare scenario is like, or like the bummer scenario is like your kid has this like dream, it's not really vetted out, you dump some money into it and they quit after 6 months, and it's like,
Yeah.
I don't want my kids to do that. But if it's a well thought through idea and I feel confident they're going to execute, I think it'd be
I think something my wife's family
fun.
did is they loaned $1,000 to buy our first trailer house.
Mm, super.
Right. And it's not like a business loan, but in a lot of ways, what it enabled us to do is we spent a few $1,000s. We fixed up the trailer house. We sold it for 70. So we made $20,000.
Yeah.
Right. And then we took that 20, we bought another place. We sold that for more. And then we took that and we took it and bought another place. And eventually we made, like on our third home that we did, I think we made like 200K or something. And so we paid off her dad, and we had this money and this ability to have lived in these homes that we couldn't have afforded,
Yeah.
right? If we didn't have that support. But he was charging us interest. At the time it was 5%,
Love it.
which was meaningful. I mean, it was not like a great investment on his end, but like for us, we're like, a home loan at the time you could get for 2 or 3%.
Yeah.
So it was a really cool and empowering experience to have somebody, invest in us at a young age.
Yeah.
When I was 20 years old,
Yeah.
and set me up for success in ways that I don't think, very many other things could have done, so.
And it's not like a direct handout, which is cool. The
No,
expectation to get paid back. And I'm sure they saw you guys and were like, they're confident people,
yeah,
they're savvy. Like if I give them this money, the odds are pretty high they're not gonna just go and waste this on something
quit.
stupid, which is cool.
Well, we had to have a house for him to get us the money, right? So we had to put it into a hard asset, which I think makes sense, right? Because now there's collateral. I'm not just going to be like, spend $50,000 on Facebook ads to promote some idea, right? Instead, it's like, there's an asset.
Pretty
And so I think, worst case scenario, we fail and he can go sell the asset,
Yeah, which is cool.
Yeah. So I thought it was cool. I really appreciate his support. So I think, parents, we can do a lot. Last question I want to talk about here is just, I remember as I kind of progressed throughout my career, first it was, I was making, I think we were paying ourselves $2,000 a month was our first check, right? I was like so happy about $2,000. And then it was like, I think we ended up paying, I think the most I ever paid myself was maybe 30K a year or something. I can't remember. It wasn't a ton of money in my career because my goal was to grow the business as fast as we could, then sell the business. But as I kind of made more money, I feel like my perspective changed on a lot of things, right? And for instance, we'll talk about spirituality a little bit, but when I used to pray every day that I would land a new client, right? Like, God, help me get a new client. And like, it was out of survival that I was begging for this to happen, and then all of a sudden you don't need new clients, right? And so then, my relationship with deity has changed substantially since I've had money. And not because I think money doesn't change who you are, but I think it frees up maybe capacity to think beyond getting a new client. And now that capacity is spent thinking on how do I enhance this or that or whatever within my life, like, or think deeper about, is that prayer for a new client even like meaningful, right? Or is it just like a selfish? Anyways, so I'm curious your thoughts on philosophy, spirituality, like what's important. Like, do you feel like there's been this progression since you've made money? How has that gone for you?
Yeah, it's interesting because my spirituality has changed a lot over the time frame of my
Yeah.
entrepreneurial success. So it's always hard to look back and be like, what's the causal relationship there? Like, did
Yeah.
one help the other or not? Did my belief in God make me successful, or did becoming successful make me have a different relationship with God? It's so hard to know. But yeah, I think for me over the years, I think by the biggest thing I can say is my priorities have definitely shifted over the years as far as like what's most important to me in my life. And, for me, that's definitely been family. It's definitely been giving back. Like I do like to give back. Through I try to help out entrepreneurs anytime I can. I like to help out friends and family with questions. And I feel like making money has allowed me to be a little more generous with my
Yeah.
time, my money, my advice. And I think I've really appreciated that aspect of, developing over the years. And then, it's interesting that, a lot of people, as you make more money, like you said, maybe rely less on a deity to like, you said survival, or it can be like always like begging, you're always
Yeah.
begging for help on whatever, whether it's like a medical emergency or a financial emergency, a business fire
Yeah.
happening. And, there does come a point where it's like, I don't really feel like I need to be begging or like pleading for anything specific when it relates to that stuff anymore. So then it does change. And it's like, to me, I think it's become a little bit more of like helping me find purpose, helping me find
Yeah.
meaning. Where can I give back in my life? Like, what's going to give me purpose? We've tried to think through, is there ways for us to get involved in, specific organizations, or, how can we give back in ways that are effective and meaningful to us? And, I feel like that's maybe a little bit more what we focus on
Yeah.
these days, as opposed to like maybe the more traditional, you know, ways of thinking about religion or prayer and things like that. And I think it's overall been a good and positive transition to, it's honestly just kind of lucky to even be able to get to the point where you
Yeah.
can focus more on how do I find meaning and purpose in life, instead of just like, how am I going to, get food on the table? Because that's, these days, especially, that's more and more
Yeah.
reality of
So
so
hard.
many. It's just that it's gotten so much harder these days, even for entrepreneurs. It's way harder today to start a business than it was 10 years
I
ago.
agree. I agree with that.
Yeah.
This makes me think of one final question. I really appreciate your response there. I think it is way, way harder in today's world. And I think not being like having to think about survival. I mean, we even talk about Maslow's hierarchy of needs, right? Like it literally encumbers your brain and you're not able to think beyond that. So if you don't have enough money, if you don't have enough food, if you don't have the right clothes and the shelter, like your brain is limited. Curious, do you believe that you could be? I feel like you're a happy person. You're content. You feel fulfilled with your life. Do you believe you could have found that if your business failed and you had to go back to corporate? Yeah.
Good question there. I mean, my gut reaction is like, I've always said if I had to go back to the corporate world, I would be like super sad.
Yeah.
So like, yeah, if I realistically envision it, I mean, I think it would be hard. I do think
Yeah.
that like my priority of like having a flexible work life situation is like a big part of me now, that
Yeah.
I think going to work in an office 40, 50 hours a week at a set income that's not variable based on my performance, I think it would feel very limiting at this
Yeah.
point. I think it would be hard for me to swallow that. And I think I would be itching to figure out like what's the next thing I could do to try to get out. And yeah, I mean, I think that would be a real challenge, because I think it's not a guarantee, if that were to happen, that you could start a business and make it
Yeah.
successful. And I think it would require a lot of mindset adjustments at that point, I think, to be like, okay, this is my new reality. Like, I think in any situation, you can choose to be happy and find meaning and
Yeah.
purpose, happiness at any level of success and income, from like the poorest of people in the poorest of countries to the most successful. You can find happy and sad people.
Yeah.
I think for me, my initial gut reaction is I'd probably be very sad if I had to do that. But I would hope that I would try to figure out, like, okay, if this is the new reality, how can I still, find the good
I'm
and
good.
still like figure out how to have meaning in those hours where you're not at work. And there are always pros and cons to every
Yeah.
situation. There's pros to having a stable 9 to 5 job. And so I think, readjusting my mindset to focus on the pros of that and less on the loss of what you had, I think would be an important part at that point.
I like that. I agree with you that it really is happiness is internal, it's not external. So somehow we just have to change
It would,
internally,
yeah,
yeah, in
yeah,
order to find happiness.
yeah. Because my wife and I have talked about that often. About like, man, can you imagine if like somehow
Yeah.
business fail today, we lose everything? I was like, man, I literally can't imagine. But like, if it did happen, yeah, it's then it would be on you to do the work to make sure that you
Yeah.
can find happiness despite what happened. And I think it would be a challenge, but I think it is doable.
I think early on I felt a lot of fear that somehow I would lose everything,
Yeah,
And it's funny because like the chance of losing everything is pretty low, especially like I have very moderate investments. They're generally in the stock market. Most of my money is in the stock market. It's moderate. It's not seriously risky. If I lost everything, the world would be in a rough
yeah,
place.
yeah,
Right. But that didn't keep me from having significant fear.
yeah,
And so I think the ability to recognize, to reconcile that, like, no, I'm going to find happiness in this size of house, this size of house, in this environment, in that environment, whatever. Like, I'm still trying to reconcile with myself. Like, how do I avoid fear? I think avoiding fear, not avoiding fear, but overcoming fear is probably the right
yeah.
word. To me, is about being able to find hope in whatever the future brings. And I think that's, yeah,
That is smart. I think that you can live in fear as an entrepreneur often.
yeah,
I think that is smart to think like, there's always like, what's the worst case scenario? What would your plan B be, plan
yeah,
C? And yeah, I think just telling yourself that, like, no matter what happens, you can find happiness. Like you said, you can downsize your house, you can start another small business, you could get
yeah,
a 9 to 5 job and do a side gig. Like there's always more opportunities out there. And I like what you said though, because like living in anxiety and fear all the time is not healthy for the
yeah.
mind, right, at all. So
No, not at all.
yeah, I think figuring out ways to either overcome the fear or just alleviate that anxiety is super helpful. And yeah, I do think anybody can do it. And I think even if you were to lose it all, you'd figure out, what's next.
I feel good at this point if I was to lose it all. But I remember there was one night in particular I couldn't sleep, and I just remember being so afraid. And I was like, "Is this a sign? Do I need to pull all my money out of the stock market and hide it under my mattress?" Right? Like, and it's like, no, that's a stupid idea. But
Rational, but it feels so real, so
yeah,
personal.
because it was in 2022, and I had some, everyone lost money in the stock market in 2020, generally speaking. And I just remember being like,
Yeah,
it's going to go to zero. And, just being able to overcome that fear is so important for us to live a full life. So,
yeah, agreed.
but, well, thanks, brother. I appreciate your time. Any last comments that you'd want to say or?
No, this was great. I mean, I love the entrepreneurial journey. I think that, yeah, I like to give hope to other people out there to just do it because it is hard and maybe it's even harder today than it was. Yeah, I think it's so cool when people give it a shot, though. I think it's my
Agree.
last parting words of advice that I've tried to live my life with as well is I do consciously try to think like, am I more likely to regret, doing this thing or not doing this thing? Whether that's
Mm,
even short term or long term, like looking back on my life, whether that's starting a business, selling a business, doing some new venture, moving to a new state, or whatever big life decision it is. I like to try to think like, am I more likely to regret this or not? And kind of let that be the guide for my life.
I like that question. I really do. More likely to regret this or not.
Yeah.
Uh, well, thanks, man. Appreciate you jumping on, and I hope others can enjoy it too.
Yeah. Thanks.